Next on Currents News, a new attack on religious freedom. A Catholic nurse is saying she was forced to participate in an abortion. Puerto Rico is safe tonight, but Hurricane Dorian now has its sights set on Florida. Franciscan friars travel from Brooklyn to the U.S.-Mexico border to help refugees. Will have their emotional story. Plus, Pope Francis is about to return once more to sub-Saharan Africa. He's expected to speak about matters of life and death. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. America's bishops are calling it grotesque, and the White House is taking action after a Catholic nurse says she was forced to participate in an abortion. The attack on religious freedom trampled on the nurse's moral objections, according to her lawyer.
They did not respect those who had this conscientious objection to abortion.
The attack on a Catholic nurse's religious freedom and her right to morally object to abortion is spurring the Trump administration to act. Federal law known as the Church Amendment protects the rights of medical professionals to morally object to the deadly procedure. The incident occurred at the University of Vermont Medical Center, and now the feds are pursuing an action that could strip the hospital of its federal money. The nurse at the center of the storm is staying anonymous, but her lawyer, Francis Mannion, accuses the hospital of deliberately forcing his client to go against her will.
There was other staff available who could have stepped in and just didn't, and we think that's because that was sort of the toxic atmosphere there with regard to this issue.
The Department of Health and Human Services is leading Washington's response against the hospital, stating that staff there were led to believe they were scheduled to assist in a procedure that did not involve the abortion, when in fact it did. They objected but were coerced by UVMMC into participating. The experience left them deeply traumatized. Mannion says his client was on an opt-out list because of her Catholic faith, but feared what her employer might do.
Our client talks about a systemic disdain for the rights of conscience, and they want to see that fixed.
The U.S. government wants it fixed too. HHS is giving the hospital a 30-day deadline to get in line with the law and enforce conscious protection so that nurses, doctors, and others aren't forced to perform abortions against their religious beliefs. The medical center's president, Dr. Stephen Leffler, is defending the hospital.
We believe we have a strong policy. We believe we have a policy that meets the needs of our patients and our staff, and we're not changing our policy right now, but we would be willing to work on making it better.
According to the nurse's attorneys, the hospital started performing elective abortions in 2017. They say that's when the former CEO of Planned Parenthood in New England took over as the new chair of the medical center's board of trustees. The U.S. Bishops' Conference is applauding the Trump administration for taking action in the case. They're also criticizing the hospital for forcing the nurse to perform the abortion against her will, saying it is a grotesque violation of civil rights and of federal law to force someone to perform or participate in an abortion against their beliefs. Forcing a nurse to participate in the killing of a defenseless unborn child is abhorrent. We commend and thank the administration for taking corrective action to enforce the law. James Comey is on the defensive today after the Justice Department says the former FBI director leaked classified information. The DOJ Inspector General released a report this morning saying Comey violated agency policies when he retained and leaked a set of memos documenting meetings with President Trump. The report states that Comey set a dangerous example for FBI employees in an attempt to achieve a personally desired outcome. Comey won't be charged. Now for the latest on Hurricane Dorian, the storm is getting stronger by the hour and could be a monster Category 4 by the time it slams into the U.S. mainland over Labor Day weekend. Kristen Holmes reports the latest.
Preparations are underway as Florida braces for Hurricane Dorian.
All Floridians really need to monitor Hurricane Dorian and make the necessary preparation.
The storm now forecast to strengthen it to a Category 4 hurricane with 130-mile-per-hour winds by Sunday, before making landfall in the Sunshine State early Monday morning. But officials say that where exactly the storm will land remains uncertain.
I want to urge our citizens to be ready to move very quickly. We still don't know a lot about the initial or the path that this storm will take.
I mean, you could make a case for places like Miami and the Keys to get impacted.
The Florida governor declaring a state of emergency and authorities urging residents to be ready for anything.
If it stays on the track it's on right now, we do expect significant impacts, probably beginning Sunday. So what we're telling people to do now is make sure you have your batteries, your gas, your food, make sure you're prepared.
Floridians heeding this warning, lining up at gas stations like this one and emptying shelves in stores across the state.
You'd rather be over-prepared than wait till the last minute.
Kristen Holmes, Currents News.
As Dorian stays on a collision course with Florida, the news from Puerto Rico is much better. The storm only sideswiped the island. We checked in with Archbishop Roberto Gonzalez Nieves in San Juan.
Well, in terms of major damages, thank God there have not been any on the main island of Puerto Rico. As you may know, Puerto Rico is a small archipelago, so the two smaller islands, Vieques and Culebra, suffered damage, obviously not as severe as during Hurricane Maria.
The Archbishop told us much more needs to be done after Maria, especially with the rebuilding of homes. A change tonight from the Trump administration over how oil and gas are produced. The EPA is reportedly rolling back a regulation that limited the amount of methane gas that can leak from industry equipment. Methane is the main component of natural gas. Critics contend the change will increase air pollution. The environmental changes come on the heels of another Trump administration policy about FACE. The kids of some members of the U.S. Armed Forces won't automatically become citizens. In certain cases, if the parents are not citizens, they'll have to apply for their children to become citizens. The Pentagon is saying tonight the number of families affected is small. The flood of undocumented immigrants at the southern border brought a team of Franciscan brothers from Brooklyn to Texas. The missionaries arrived in El Paso the day after the city's name was in headlines around the world. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports.
St. Francis plans to do something.
For these 5 Franciscan friars from Brooklyn, spending time at the U.S.-Mexico border was emotional.
I was changed by this experience.
They were there on a mission to help undocumented migrants in El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico. For 1 week, the friars worked with men, women, and children. One incident is fixed in Brother Gregory Cellini's memory.
I gave someone half an orange. You think I had given him the world.
The brothers watched as asylum seekers arrived at a shelter in El Paso after being released by ICE. The migrants' belongings packed into plastic bags, only able to sleep on cots on this warehouse floor.
These are human beings. How can we take their value, dignity, and worth away from them? And when you hear their story, you can't but be touched.
One story Brother Joseph Bach recalls is a mother and her 2 young children fleeing Mexico for Oklahoma, escaping death.
The mother told the story that they had found bodies in the area, and the cartels came for the 10-year-old boy, and they wanted him to be a drug runner. She got scared and packed the kids up because that was not the life that she wanted for her kids.
What made their journey even more emotional, their first night at the border.
In order to keep faith.
It was the day after the mass shooting in El Paso. The friars attended an interfaith prayer service.
It was a somber and silent testimonial in many ways because the crowd was very sedate, sorrowful. No doubt that there were people there who had lost loved ones.
But through a journey full of sorrow, Brother Jeffrey Clement recalls a glimmer of faith at the El Paso shelter, watching asylum seekers point to a U.S. map, searching for their final destination.
Their eyes lit up with hopefulness. That's where we're going. That's a new life.
New lives for immigrants and new life lessons for these religious men.
The teachers, myself among them, are in fact the students.
Now the brothers plan on sharing their experience at schools with young people. In downtown Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Next week, the Pope is undertaking a major mission to Africa starting September 4th. He'll visit 3 nations where tensions are high: Mozambique, Madagascar, and Mauritius. The trip could be one of the most politically delicate of his previous 30 journeys as pontiff. The national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, joins us now. Christopher, the Holy Father will be in sub-Saharan Africa for a week. The second time he's traveling to the region. Why has he decided to visit these countries?
Yeah, these are locations that don't typically come to mind as sort of papal destinations. In some places, the Catholic population is even small, and they're tiny countries. Many of them that are facing a papal trip for the first time. I think the main thing that's motivating him on this trip is what motivates him for a lot of his trips: is that these are looked over areas of the world that he wants to both shine a global spotlight on and encourage the local community. So I think that's what's going through his mind in deciding to make this. There's also, for each of the countries that he's visiting, a particular reason or message that he wants to give to them in person.
Speaking of message, what do you think the Holy Father is expected to tell the people he meets? Is there a central unifying theme to this mission?
I'd say a unifying theme is that of that people are their greatest resources. In Mauritius, there's been a recent, they've experienced a lot of natural disasters, and in Mozambique, poverty, and I think he wants them to see, whether it's disaster or just general poverty, that you can utilize what you have, as individuals to collectively turn the country around. And I think both of these countries are on the United Nations sort of least developed countries list, and I think he wants to give them a sense of hope that, just because they may be at the bottom of some list doesn't mean that they can't overcome that and offer their natural talents and gifts to sort of, overcome that.
Now, Christopher, the African continent is key to the growth of Catholicism. In just a year, from 2014 to 2015, the Catholic population soared almost 20%. Might the Pope make more trips to Africa in the near future?
Yeah, the Pope has a fondness for Africa, and one of the top priorities for him is to visit the region of South Sudan. He wants to make a joint visit with Justin Welby, the head of the Anglican Church, to sort of bring hope to this war-torn country and to say, peace is the only way forward, so let's do this.
Christopher White, the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Emily.
You can count on Currents News to have comprehensive team coverage of the Pope's trip to Africa starting next week. Crux Rome Bureau Chief Inez San Martin is flying with the Holy Father on board his plane. She'll have reports for us throughout the mission. Coverage begins Wednesday, September 4th. Coming up next on this Currents News, New York Senator is out. New York City's mayor is still in as the Democratic slate for president undergoes a big change. Governor Andrew Cuomo is wiping clean the criminal records of thousands in the state. We'll tell you why. New Jersey's assisted suicide law is back on the books. Bishop DiMarzio is moments away talking about saving lives. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. There will be fewer Democrats on stage in September for the next debate. Only 10 have made the cut. One who didn't is New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and she quit the presidential race altogether. New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio is still running for the White House, but he won't be in the debate. The party's rules require candidates to hit at least 2% in the polls and get 130,000 donors. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo is wiping out nearly 25,000 criminal convictions in the state. He's decriminalizing marijuana with a new law that will automatically clear low-level pot penalties from people's records. Cuomo said communities of color suffered most from the enforcement of drug laws. Over in New Jersey, courts are giving the go-ahead for a law on assisted suicide, making it the 7th state to allow patients diagnosed with a terminal illness the ability to get a lethal prescription of drugs. The U.S. bishops strongly disapprove of the practice. Bishop DiMarzio is with Ed Wilkinson to talk more about the sanctity of life. Ed?
Thank you. We're going to talk with Bishop DiMarzio today about something that's happening in one of our nearby states, and a state that's not unfamiliar to Bishop DiMarzio, New Jersey. Bishop. They recently passed a law down there that allows for assisting terminally ill people to, in effect, kill themselves, commit suicide. Politicians see it as compassionate. The church looks at it in another way. What is the church's stance on assisting people to kill themselves?
Well, again, life is inviolate. No one should take a life, and no one should take their own life. Basically, that's what we believe. Today, more than ever, people who are dying can be assisted to avoid the atrocious suffering that people in the past had to undergo dying. So it really isn't an excuse to say it's mercy killing or compassionate, because there are ways that people can deal with their pain and the difficulty that they have. Again, one of the problems today is that many people don't believe there's any afterlife. So why suffer any pain at all in this life? Why be inconvenienced? Just let me end it, all right? If there's it's a terminal illness, etc. But people of faith have a different way to looking at it. But even if you're not a person of faith, you have to look at life as it is, and it's such a slippery slope. You know, will elderly people think that, oh, I should take the pill because I'm a burden to my family or to society? I should move on. This is what's happened in the countries that have legalized this, someplace in the Netherlands, etc. So it's a very slippery issue that giving in and any way produces major problems.
Yeah, Bishop Chechio in Metuchen, somebody you know from Camden, he's kind of taking the lead among the bishops down there, and he says that this attitude reflects a failure on the part of society to come up with creative ways to help people.
Well, we have a lot of those ways already. The thing is to use them, to have palliative care that is not intrusive, that allows people, again, to deal with their pain and suffering in a way that they can tolerate. But again, if we're just going to ask people to take these pills that hasten their death, or certainly not just hasten it, but they cause it, that's really not acceptable.
And we have institutions like Calvary Hospital that assist people in their final days. What do you think of the work that the people like at Calvary Hospital do? That's really a heroic mission that these people undertake.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we have in our own diocese. Calvary's here in 2 different places, originally in the city, but they're right here in Brooklyn and Queens right now. So again, you hear the testimony of people who have had their loved ones in there, of how they're helped to face death in a positive way, to see that it's a part of life, and that the suffering that they undergo, even if they're not Catholic, whatever it is, they find meaning in the end of life, just as they see it at the beginning of life in this world, even if they don't have a hope for eternal life. Would hope that they would have that, but some people don't. But at least that would bringing their relatives in, having the relatives understand what the person is going through, enables them to understand their own frailty and mortality. So it's a very good thing that we have available.
Right, and of course the church has almost the whole theology about suffering and how we can offer that up. We have a Christian understanding of suffering. What does that mean to us? I mean, it's almost like a sharing in the death of Jesus on the cross.
Definitely. You know, St. Paul says we make up in our own bodies what's lacking in the suffering of Christ. What could be lacking? Only that we're not participating. So we participate in the saving of the world right now. It's not just the fact that was of the past. The continual redemption of the world happens through the human suffering that's offered with Christ and his redemptive act. So that's our theology, but it's also our practice, that we understand that any human suffering is not wasted. There's a reason in God's plan for it, and when we give it back to God, he can do something good with it.
Thank you, Bishop, for that understanding on death and dying. And now we're going to send it back to the news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Still to come on Currents News, the story of a delicate operation to save a species, saving humanity from extinction, and what the Pope is doing in connection with that. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/OurDiocesanFamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. There are only 2 northern white rhinos left anywhere on the planet. Now a delicate operation is underway in Kenya to save the species. A team of vets and scientists at a zoo in the African nation has artificially inseminated white rhino eggs. They used sperm from a northern male that was frozen 5 years ago. The plan is to use a southern white rhino female as a surrogate mother for the embryo. A zoo official explains that step will be tricky.
What we have to do next, it means that we have to somehow develop technique for embryo transfer. And on this task, we again cooperate with the zoos in Europe.
This procedure has never been attempted before. 7 rhino eggs are being used, and if it works, the world might soon see northern white rhinos again. Today, the world observed the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. In the summer of 1945, nuclear weapons were tested for the very first time. Since then, the Vatican has long been a voice for disarmament, especially Pope Francis. Melissa Butts has more from St. Peter's Square.
From 1945 until 1996, there were 2,000 global nuclear explosions. Today, the international community is hoping that these explosions and the tests to carry them out will soon end.
Contains MERS.
Every August 29th marks the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. It was established in 2009 in memory of the closure of the Semipalatinsk polygon, the main nuclear testing facility for the former Soviet Union. Yet, still today, the danger of nuclear tests remains an international threat.
Hay que empeñarse por un mundo sin armas nucleares, aplicando plenamente el Tratado de No Proliferación en la letra y en el espíritu, hacia una total prohibición de estos instrumentos.
Nuclear weapons are inherently the most dangerous weaponry on the planet. Organizations such as De Gasperi Foundation are studying dangers that might arise if the ghost of a nuclear war is rekindled. De Gasperi Foundation's been promoting the website freedomanatomy.com to deepen defense, especially contributions by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The project Freedom Anatomy is an educational website containing data and interactive maps.
As Pope Francis says when he talks about the piecemeal World War III we are experiencing today, threats not only limited to military, they are linked to the use of economic tools, propaganda, improper use of the internet, fake news, cyber attacks, and terrorism.
The Freedom Anatomy project aims to be a tool, bringing greater attention to global citizens who want to know the areas of crisis and security strategies at an international level. Arms Control Association estimates there are around 14,000 nuclear warheads circulating around the world, with 90% belonging to Russia and the United States. While most are for military use, around 5,000 are waiting to be dismantled. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
That is Currents News. I'm Emily Drewby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.